right, so like I said, to continue with the story, but I'm gonna go quick. I was in Kauai, and like I said, I was anti-white because I saw myself as Jewish. I wanted a races to mix, and but I'm in Kauai because my family, my mom and dad didn't believe me about the quadrumile. They wanted me to go to Kauai, and they thought I had schizophrenia. They wanted me to live with my grandpa, so I go live with my grandpa. But again, I hated my grandpa because in my mind, my grandpa was a Nazi white supremacist. He was always against welfare, everything. He was kind of seemed pro-religious, spiritual, and I always saw that as white supremacist. You know, he was against pornography. It seemed he seemed more right winger, and I was always a leftist, communist, Marxist my whole life. But I would take his teachings and I would try to make them leftist. But I'm gonna get more into that. But so I go to Kauai, and this is the thing. And so my grandpa, I get there, and my grandpa and my uncle are treating me bad. So my grandpa didn't believe the quadrumodel. So I'm telling him, like, hey, grandpa, can you help me get the quadrumodel out? Like I said, I wanted to get the quadrumodel out, especially so that I could try to get basketball videos when I was younger. So I thought if I get this big, then I'll be able to get power, get basketball videos, get respect. So once I get big, then I'll ask people for basketball videos. Again, like my grandpa said, maybe I was trying to make things happen. I wasn't in the flow. I should have just asked people. But again, I was afraid. I was in fear. I didn't want to just ask people because I thought that they might just say no. And I thought if they say no, then I'll never get the videos. Because then even if I do get power later, the people won't want to seem like liars. So I thought first I'll get the power and the respect, and then I'll get my basketball videos because I want to study the swag flow and stuff. So, but my grandpa never had respect for me. You know, he came in from Kauai. He lived in Kauai. He came in to Los Angeles, so he didn't have respect for me and then my shot was messed up. He didn't know how good of a shooter I was. He thought there was something wrong with me, and I'll get to this. He didn't think it was a shooting machine. I'll get to this. But so, and again, like I said, if my mom and dad would have just talked to me, none of this would have happened. But again, my grandpa was the one who came up with the rule. No talking about the past. You're not allowed to talk about the past, because if you talk about the past, that's, if you're in the flow, you're in the eternal moment. So, you don't talk about the past. So I wanted to tell my mom and dad about the shoot-away machine, but I couldn't at this point because I knew I wasn't allowed to talk about the past. But I wanted to get basketball videos when I was younger, but I wanted to also get the quadrumodel out. So I'm telling my grandpa, can you help me get the quadrumodel out? But my grandpa's like, the quadrumodel's not the theory of everything. And he's making fun of it. And then he was like, well, what about the planets? There's 10 planets, not 4. And I was like, there's 4 terrestrial planets and there's 4 gas giant planets. He's like, oh my God, you believe in quote? This is crazy. He didn't realize that I'm not crazy. I did discover the theory of everything. So, and my uncle was making fun of me too. He's like, what about all the things that are in 7s? What about all the things that are in 3s? Yes, there's things in 7s, there's things in 3s, but this 4-fold pattern, this 3 + 1 pattern is dominant in reality. Now, this is the other thing. When I was in Israel, some of the rabbis were saying that that Germans cannot understand that Hashem controls everything, and they think that things are random, and they can't understand that there is an order behind everything, and that's what the quadrumodel proves. So I was like, okay. So my grandpa was, I saw my grandpa as German, so I'm like, okay, this is kind of proof what the rabbis are saying. And again, this further fueled my anti-white desires to want to mix everybody. So I'm like, okay, they're not able to understand the quadrumodel. They're not able to understand the truth about existence. Again, so it made me hate white people even more. I'm like, yeah, white people can't understand that shit. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I really want to mix the white race, defeat the white race. So, like I said, my whole life I was a Marxist. My whole life because I think I saw myself as Jewish. I saw myself as more of a person of color, and I really like Jewish people. Some of my best friends were Jewish, and they were really good at basketball, and I saw Jews as smarter. I saw Jews as the best, and I wanted to defeat the white people because I saw the white people as the biggest threat to the Jews. So, when I was so I'm in Kauai, but I discovered the theory of everything. I want to get the quadrumodel out, but my grandpa, he's like, no, so my grandpa's like, so my uncle and my grandpa are like, if you're going to be staying with us, you can't just be a leech. You can't just ask for handouts. You're going to need to get a job. And I'm like, Grandpa, I discovered the theory of everything. Maybe you can help me get this out, and then things will be good. Then I'll maybe make money off of this. I really did discover the theory of everything, which I did with the quadrumodel. But my grandpa's like, you didn't discover the theory of everything. And then my grandpa's like, he told me to mop the kitchen. So he had me get a mop out, and I start mopping the kitchen, but I never used a mop before. It's one of those ones with the where you dump the mop in the water, and then you do the mopping, and I'd never done any of that. So I'm doing it, and I didn't know how to do it. And my grandpa was like, "You don't know how to mop?" And I was like, "No." And my grandpa was like, "Oh my God, you are a parasite." And I was like, and then my uncle comes in, and my grandpa uncle was like, "Yeah, his mom and dad did everything for him. They spoiled him, because they thought he was going to be a basketball superstar, and they did everything for him. And now that things didn't work out, they threw him to the side, but they never taught him how to do anything. So now he's useless. He doesn't know how to do anything." And that's true. That's the ironic thing was like, and that's the funny thing, how my mom and dad are always like, "Oh my, now they're just like, I want to be independent. I want to be independent." They didn't do anything to help me become independent. They never taught me how to do anything. They did everything for me my whole life. I never once did any chore. They never gave me any morality. They cuss all the time. They never gave me any morality. They never taught me how to do anything. My mom cooked for me, cleaned for me. I never once made my bed. I never once did one thing. My mom did everything for me. As my uncle said, they spoiled me. But then, when the things got bad, they're like, throw them to the side. And my grandpa's like, "Whoa, make them independent." My mom's like, "Okay, yeah, make them independent. Get them out of our lives." But how are you going to make me independent if you never taught me how to do anything? If you spoiled me my whole life. So that's what my uncle was saying. He was like, yeah. He was like, his parents spoiled him his whole life. They thought he was going to be an NBA star. And now that things didn't work out, now they threw him under the bus. And then my grandpa was like, yeah, he was like, "I can't believe you don't know how to mop. You're a parasite." And I remember I got mad at my grandpa and I said, "Hey," I was like, "don't call me a parasite. That's kind of fucked up." I was like, that's what the Nazis called the Jews. Like, that's not cool. It's kind of weird that you said that. And then my grandpa said, he said the Jews were parasites in Germany. So then I was like, "What?" And my uncle was like, my uncle was like smiling and like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, that's true." And again, I always knew my whole life that my grandpa was a Nazi. And I always knew that my uncle was a Nazi. But then I was like, okay, I always knew this. I was like, fuck. And so then I was like, "Fuck you guys, dude." But my uncle was like, "Yeah, he was like, Ryan. Then my uncle was trying to get on he was like, "Ryan, listen, the Jews hate us. They hate white people. They hate Germans." He said, "We're not even Germans." He said, "It's Deutschland. It's not Germany. The reason why the Jews made it so that we're called Germans is because they want to relate us to germs that they want to extinguish." And so I was like, okay, yep. I always knew that my fucking grandpa and my uncle were Nazis. I knew it my whole life. And now it's just validated. So I was just like, because my grandpa was always an Ayn Rand fan, don't give welfare and stuff. And I was like, okay. And now I was like, okay, he is a Nazi. So then my grandpa was like, "Yeah." He's all mad. And my uncle was like, "Yeah." And my uncle's like, "Ryan, the Germans were not the bad guys in World War II. He said the English were the bad guys. He said the English were the ones who were colonizing the whole world. The Germans were fighting against the bankers and the English and the cabal and all that stuff." So I was like, but in my mind, remember, my whole life I was a Marxist communist. So I hated this. And I was like, fuck you guys, dude. So then now I'm stuck in Kauai with Nazis, basically, and I was a communist. So then I wanted to study with my grandpa more. But then, so I remember I was reading the Bible with my grandpa because I wanted to understand what my grandpa taught. And and I forget, but I think that my grandpa kind of stopped teaching me. He was like, "I'm not really interested in studying with you anymore." But then I told my grandpa, I was like, "Hey, Grandpa, I'm a communist. Like, I'm a Marxist. I don't believe your shit. I don't believe your transpersonal psychology." I didn't know it was called existential metapsychiatry at the time, but I was like, "I don't believe your existential metapsychiatry. I don't believe that shit." I was like, "I'm a communist. I'm a Marxist." So my grandpa would teach like, you should have faith, and faith is to let go and to be in the flow. But again, like at the time, I thought that when he's talking about being in the flow, I was thinking that's like, oh, just be passive and just let things happen. And I was like, okay, but I'm a Marxist, so I don't want to just like, my grandpa would tell me like, you just have to accept things. You just have to accept what you when bad things are. And I was like, no, you don't just accept things. My grandpa's always telling me, I feel like my grandpa made things worse with my family, my mom and dad, because as I'm being beat up, he's like, "Ryan, you just have to accept things. Your dad doesn't want to shoot you. You just have to accept it." Whereas I thought that instead of doing that, my grandpa should have tried to influence my mom and dad to not making bad calls. He's like, "Ryan, you just have to accept bad calls." But I'm like, no, you should be, rather than just tell, because then my parents listen to that and they're like, okay, we could just make whatever calls we want. We can be as bad as we want. And I'm like, no, you should influence them and tell them, hey, encourage them to not make bad calls. So I thought that my grandpa was a Nazi and to basically just like let bad things happen to you. And I'm like, no, I'm a communist. You got to change shit. And you should have helped me, Grandpa, but he didn't help me. He made things worse. So, I'm like, at that point, so I called my mom and I was like, Mom, Grandpa and Amos are Nazis. Please, I don't want to be in Kauai. And my mom was like, she was like, no, you have to be in Kauai. You're fucking schizophrenic. You need to be going to see a doctor. And I was like, you see, if my mom and dad would have just listened to me and talked to me, all this crazy stuff wouldn't happen. So then I'm in Kauai. I'm stuck with my grandpa and my uncle, who I think are Nazis. So then, and like I said, none of this would have happened if my mom and dad would just talk to me. So then I start to go on Facebook, and I'm writing how my grandpa's a Nazi type of stuff. Where I'm writing. Then I start writing my communist ideas down, because I was trying to get first I was just trying to get the quadrant stuff out, but no one was responding to my stuff, and I didn't know it was because my mom had my Facebook password. So every time I would post a quadrant thing, she would either delete it or she would put it on only me. So this is, again, now I'm starting to go crazy a little bit, because I'm like, dude, why is no one responding to my quadrant stuff? So then I go to IHP Central and I'm showing them all my quadrant stuff. But I'm telling them, go to my Facebook and you'll see evidence for this. But then they're like, dude, are you schizophrenic or something? Because they would go to my Facebook and there was nothing on my Facebook, or maybe a few posts, because my mom was deleting all my stuff. So, but I didn't even know that. I didn't know my mom was putting everything on only me. So I'm just confused. Just think of it this. My mom should have just been talking to me. If my mom wouldn't throw me to Kauai, if my mom and dad would have just been talking to me, treating me normal. But, I'm not allowed to talk about the past because of the abuse that happened. My grandpa made up that rule. And that was another thing I thought was Nazi. Like, I remember one time my grandpa, we were watching the TV, and it was a thing about the Holocaust. But my grandpa was saying how, talking about the past and always rehashing the Holocaust and all that stuff doesn't necessarily help. And it's best not to rehash the past. And again, and I thought that, again, I was like, that's a typical Nazi thing to do. Another thing that my grandpa would say is that there is no such thing as racism. He would say that there's just consequences of dualistic software, but there's no such thing as racism. But I was like, no, Grandpa, there is such thing as racism. And I thought there was especially racism against black people. And I wanted to see it through a Darwinian lens. And I was like, it's because black people have different genetics, because they're more genetically diverse, and that's why even black people are racist against themselves, and that's why the white race is racist against them, because it's different genetics. And because I wanted to destroy religion, and I wanted to believe everything was Darwinism and Freudianism, and I was a Marxist and a leftist and a materialist, and I wanted to destroy religion. So then the people on INTB Central, they're not understanding. They're like, what's the deal with the quadrant stuff? We don't see, you're not making any, like, we don't understand it. But I didn't know my mom was deleting all my stuff. So nobody was responding to my quadrant model stuff because my mom was hiding all of it because she had my Facebook password, but I didn't know that. So then I start to think, okay, well, they're not responding to this. Well, I'll explain to them my anti-religion Marxist stuff. And again, and another thing was I was rebelling against my grandpa, because I was like, my grandpa's a Nazi and I'm a communist. So then I start to explain to everybody my anti-religious Marxist stuff. So I'm like, basically I was trying to describe that Christianity was just a trick by the Jews to to defeat the Romans. And I discovered this even more in depth when I was on Kauai, but this was a general thesis that I discovered. It was huge. But like I said, my idea was that when like Jesus was multiplying bread, that was really him telling everybody to share. So again, like I was anti-white, so I wanted everybody to share. I was really into welfare. So I wanted to destroy the white race. So it's ironic because my uncle's like, Ryan, the Jews hate us. They want to destroy us. But, and I'm fighting against that. But this is the ironic thing. I did hate them and I did want to destroy them. So this is the irony, is that like, it's almost like the universe was like doing some sort of magical like dance with me. It's like I was I was facing my shadow. My uncle was right. I hated my uncle. I thought he was a Nazi white supremacist, but he's saying the Jews wanted to destroy us, to destroy the German race and stuff. But the fact of the matter was I did. I remember when I was in Israel, I was like fantasizing about how it would destroy the German race for, what they did with the Holocaust. And I was a communist and I was anti-white. So my uncle was actually right, And so, so basically though, so then my goal was, okay, I'm going to destroy Christianity because I saw Christianity as white supremacy. I'm going to destroy religion. So I'm talking on ITB Central, and I'm basically describing how, in my opinion, religion is all just, like I looked at it through Nietzsche's perspective and a Darwinian perspective. It's all about power dynamics. So I'm describing how, the priests just got power because, religious people, they just, by saying like, oh, we're going to go to heaven, then they can feel superior even if they're inferior, right? That's a Nietzsche's idea. So I was like, that's why religion's attractive. So I'm giving Nietzsche's idea. But then I'm also talking about like Marxism and Darwinism. So I'm like, and, also it's a way for, the priests to consolidate power into their genetic lines. And it's also a way for like, the reason why I thought that like the Christians tend to be Europeans and the Muslims tend to be black, and the Sunnis are Arabs but the Shiites are Persians, because I was like, these are different genetic groups, so they develop different religions so they can maintain differentiation, so they can maintain their genetic lines. So I'm like, this is really the basis behind all religion. So I'm trying to destroy religion though, because my ultimate goal was to destroy religion to get everybody to mix. So I thought, okay, if I destroy religion and create like a four-caste society, then everybody will mix, and if everybody's mixed, then there will be, what I was telling people on INTP Central is if everybody's mixed, then there will be no more conflict, because really the basis behind all the religions and all the conflict is genetic Darwinism and fights between different genetic lines and different Darwinian lines. But really my ultimate goal was to destroy the white people. So I'm trying to mask it under like, yeah, this would be the ultimate thing, would be to get, dissolve borders and get everybody to mix. And if everybody mixed, then that would stop all of the division and all the conflicts in the world. But really, my ultimate goal was, because I saw myself as Jewish, was to destroy the white people, to defeat the white people, right? But so but then I start describing my ideas about Christianity. So I'm like, listen, Christianity was just a Darwinian trick. And so I'm describing how like the Jews before Jesus is killed, they say like, put the blood on us. And I was like, yeah, that's an allusion to the Passover, where the blood is put on you and that forgives you of your sins, so you don't have to die. And I was saying, so when Jesus was sacrificed and he's a sacrificial lamb, the sacrifice was in order to convert the Romans to Christianity. Now, the Romans were the enemies of the Jews. They were going to kill the Jews. But by converting to Christianity, the Roman centurion says, this must be the Son of God. So I'm like, he then converts to Christianity. Now the Romans convert to Christianity. The army converts to Christianity. Now they're a peaceful religion. And they're told by Paul and all them, hey, Paul says to them, hey, we gave you these spiritual blessings. Now give us material blessings. So I'm like, it was just a Darwinian trick. The Jews converted you so that you converted the white people. Because again, I was anti-white, but they converted the white people so that they would become Christians, so that instead of wanting to kill the Jews, they would protect the Jews and give them back the Jewish homeland. It was just a Darwinian trick. It was just a trick. It was fake. And that was the ultimate thing with Jesus. And so he died. He says that he died to save the people from their sins. But I was like, it's not the people. It wasn't everybody from their sins. It was to save the Jews from their sins, because the Jews were supposed to be killed due to their sins. But by converting their enemy, the Romans who were going to kill them, it stopped the Romans from killing them, and that saved the Jewish people. So I was like, it was just a trick. Christianity is just a trick. But why did I want to believe this too? I wanted to believe it because I thought that Christianity was white supremacy, religion's white supremacy, and I wanted to just destroy our religion. And I didn't just try to destroy Christianity. I was also trying to destroy Buddhism, because I thought Buddhism was also white supremacy and all that stuff, and Hinduism, because Hinduism was just like, I saw it as like the Aryans. The Aryans came and they imposed the religion in order so they can consolidate power into themselves. And I thought Buddhism, the same thing. I thought, because like they say that, I was using Nietzsche's idea. Like Nietzsche says that it's just to pacify people. People become religious so that the priest can get power. It's just to pacify people. And it's just so that it maintains order in society, and that's good for the genes of the tribe. And so people develop these religions because I was like, it's the 10 Commandments didn't come from God. I wanted to destroy religion. So I'm like, it's obvious. Don't kill, don't steal. Yeah, because that creates order, and order is good for people's genes, and it maintains a tribe, and it maintains your group, and that's good for your genes. So I was like, religion there's nothing special about it. So I wanted to destroy religion because I was a Marxist communist, and I wanted everybody to mix, and I wanted to ultimately destroy the white people, and especially destroy Christianity. So I went all at it with Christianity. So I'm like the Ninevites, Jonah converts the Ninevites and then but he's upset about converting the Ninevites because God's like, but there's many of them and they have many cattle. And I was like, you see, the reason why he converted the Ninevites was because they were the Jews' enemy, but they had many cattle. So by converting them, then they would start to help the Jews, and the Jews would get their resources. But it says later in the Bible that Nineveh is destroyed by God. So it says the Ninevites believe and the Jews don't believe in God. But the Jews end up being saved, but the Ninevites end up being destroyed. And I was like, it's because the Jews are the chosen people because they don't believe, because belief is not the flow. Belief is not the flow. Belief is the second quadrant, I was trying to say. But the flow is the fourth quadrant. So they're opposites. So I'm like, so the Jews don't believe, but they're saved. But the Ninevites who do believe, they're destroyed because it was a trick. they converted them to destroy them because they were their enemy, and the Ninevites were supposed to kill the Jews for their sins. But by converting them, it saved the Jews. And I was like, and that's the same thing with Jesus. And Jesus even says, I came to perform the miracle of Jonah. And what was the miracle of Jonah? I said, because I was reading through the Bible with my grandpa, and as I'm reading through it, and I was also studying with the Korean church, which was a kind of a communist type of church. But as I'm reading, I'm coming up with these ideas. So I was like, why did Jesus say, I came to perform the miracle of Jonah? It was because the miracle of Jonah was to convert your enemy, to defeat your enemy. And then, I'm going through like the stories of Elijah, and I'm showing how all these prophets help their enemy. Like Elijah helps Naaman, who's an enemy soldier, but then they end up defeating their enemy. But I'm like, why? Because the enemy double-crossed. Because by helping your enemy, by loving your enemy, you destroy your enemy. So I was like, you see, it's all just a Darwinian trick. And it was the Jews. So, but why did I want to say all this? Because I wanted to destroy religion, and I wanted to especially destroy Christianity, because I wanted especially to mix the white people. Because I was anti-white my whole life. I was a Marxist. And I can go more into details, but I'll get more into that. But also in the back of my mind, the reason why I'm doing all this is because I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to get power because I discovered these amazing theories, and I'll get more into this, but I discovered these amazing theories. I'll get power, and I'll be a communist or whatever. I'll get power. I'll be considered the Messiah, go to Israel, get power, and people will see the quadrant model, see that I discovered the theory of everything. I'll be proclaimed the Messiah, and then I will get my basketball videos. I'll ask people for my basketball videos, and when I'm the Messiah, when I have an army behind me, I thought nobody's going to say no to me, because if they did, okay, that's it for you. That's the way I saw it. Or I'll put you in jail, and I'll make sure and I'll get all the basketball videos that I need to get. So that's the way I saw it, but I'll get more into this.